Good morning. Why don't we get started? This is the legislative briefing I do before a legislative meeting. And tomorrow, the 2nd of December, we have our 20th legislative meeting of Council Period 26. I only know that it's the 20th because the council secretary puts that on the agenda. We will not have a committee of the whole tomorrow. There will be a breakfast, and Lindsay usually updates the press with regard to the breakfast. Nothing unusual there. I don't expect that the meeting tomorrow will be very lengthy. There are a few measures on the agenda that I wanted to highlight. There's a confirmation on mayoral nominations to the Commission on Human Rights, several of those. And there are a bunch of contracts that Councilmember Henderson and Councilmember Fruman are moving that deal with healthcare or with human services. A lot of contracts, but I don't think there's anything controversial there. On non-consent, there will be the second reading on the temporary version of the juvenile curfew, and I expect there'll be a couple of amendments there. One I requested, which just speaks to making it clear that for the more targeted, expansive curfew, those are the ones that start earlier in the day. They're limited in time to make it clear that they're limited in only so many days. I think it's 4 that can be extended to 30 days. And then I think there's also going to be a limit on how long the temporary will be in effect. Councilmember Trayon White has moved or proposed a couple of emergencies dealing with pools and other recreational facilities in Ward 8. I don't know that there's support for them, but one of them is to exempt the Ward 8 pools from net zero requirements and also disapprove of reprogramming that takes money from a couple of Ward 8 recreation sites. I think they're pools, and reprograms it to the tennis center that's also in Ward 8. I don't know that there's support for that. Councilmember Felder is moving an emergency with regard to ranked choice voting, which asks for a study and proposes to delay the implementation until after that study. That's kind of tomorrow's meeting in a nutshell. I suspect that you may have some questions about that or some other things, depending upon the other things. I may or may not want to answer them. We'll see. Megan, and good morning.
Your colleague Janice Lewis George announced a bid for mayor this morning. Any reaction? And would you plan to support her? Or are you planning to support anyone else in the race?
So let's see. I think there's been a rumor about this for a while. There've been a lot of rumors going around. So I can't say that there's a surprise there. With regard to my support, I think especially when they're members, because there are rumors that there are other members who are going to run, that at least for the moment, I'm not going to be making any endorsements.
Also an election.
You were so hoping.
Or any other reaction, I guess, if not an endorsement.
I don't know that I have more reaction than
Okay.
that.
Also in the election realm on Felder's proposal, there was a hearing last week where he and a couple members raised some concerns about the board's ability to implement ranked choice voting in time for the 2026 primary. Do you support his legislation? Do you have confidence that the BOE can implement ranked choice voting by then?
Well, as I have said many times, I did not support the initiative when it was on the ballot. And I did not propose funding, which was required as part of the initiative. Nonetheless, that's where the council is. So I expect that I probably will be supporting his emergency, but I am not lobbying members with regard to it. And I don't know where the votes are on it. Does that answer all of your question?
I think so. I mean, so do you want ranked choice voting to be implemented in time for the 2026
Well,
election?
as I said, I didn't support it to begin with, so I think I'll be consistent with that position. I will say that I am sort of amused that I've talked with council members who support ranked choice voting who were at the hearing last week, who say that the board's prepared to go forward I've talked to members who were at the hearing last week who don't support ranked choice voting, who said the board was clear that the board's not ready. I think it's kind of interesting that both views can't be correct at the same time, and they seem to be equally held by, depending on what the bias is of the member. So we'll see. Martin.
So just to follow up on what Megan brought up about ranked choice voting, I don't know if you watched the entire hearing, but Director Evans, after kind of lots of rounds of questioning, started making a lot of comments about how the Board of Elections was kind of just, it's been saddled with the requirements by the council and but not funding to do the things that the council has wanted, but it'll do it regardless because it's what the board does. I mean, with those sorts of statements, do you have faith? Do you have confidence that the Board of Elections could pull off this big of a change to how the city votes in this amount of time? Whether or not you support RCV, but do you think the board itself could actually implement this on time?
I don't know that I can say more with regard to whether the board is ready or not. I will say that it was funded according to what the chief financial officer said was necessary to fund it. I will just digress for a moment and remind folks that I think that it was a little bit too slick for the legal opinion that if an initiative is, quote, subject to appropriation, unquote, then it no longer has a budget impact. And as you know, the Home Rule Act for decades has said that an initiative is not a proper measure for consideration if there's a fiscal impact, if it affects the budget. Clearly, this affects the budget, but nonetheless, there was a fiscal impact statement prepared by the chief financial officer, and it was funded as part of the budget for the current fiscal year. I do think that ranked choice voting is going to be a challenge for individual voters. This is a new and different way of voting, and it is for me a concern. Nonetheless, there are other jurisdictions that have implemented ranked choice voting, so it's not impossible. There were other hands up. Yes.
Chairman, can you just walk us through the process on what happens for any council members who may be running for additional office? Do they have to give up their seat, or is that only if it's in an election year for them?
Well, if you're referring to the announced candidates, Councilmember Pinto, who's announced, and Councilmember Robert White, who's announced both for the delegate position, and Councilmember Louis George, who's announced for mayor, they are not required to give up their seats.
And is that because
Because
they aren't up yet, or is that just how it works?
Well, I was kind of answering your question. I mean, I was thinking differently, but both answers are correct, are the same. The law doesn't require that a person has to give up their seat to run for another office, and none of the three people I mentioned have their terms up this year, so they don't have to make a choice between running for one office or running for a different office. So they're all eligible. Those three are eligible. I will note, not Council, former Chair John Wilson used to refer to this as the silly season. And we'll see how that plays out over the next few months with our legislative process. And I'm hopeful that all the members will continue to approach council work focused on the best policy best policy choices that are before us. Yeah.
Run for mayor?
I'm focusing on running for reelection.
Peace and blessings, Chairman. I was trying to get a sense of, I've seen some things, but if you can just assess your relationship with Mayor Bowser, seeing as she's stepping away from her role, we're not running for reelection. And in just assessing your relationship, can you talk about what qualities you're looking for in the next mayor?
A lot of folks have focused on where the mayor and I have disagreed from time to time in the last 11 years. Actually, if you look at the positions that we've taken generally, the mayor and I are almost always on the same page. So it's kind of interesting that focus, which isn't consistent with the record. In terms of qualities, The, I think a lot of folks lose sight of the fact that the government of the District of Columbia is a $20 billion corporation. And that's $20 billion a year. And gosh, I'm going to say there are over 60 agencies. I think it's actually more than that. And it's a very complex, broad scope government. One of the things I like about um, public services that there are just so many issues, but at the same time, that's a challenge. And so the person who is mayor is someone who is a CEO of a $20 billion corporation. How good a manager is that person? And there's a lot of public policy making, a broad range of issues from health to transportation to environment, just to fiscal stability. And how good is the candidate at grasping that complexity as well as being interested and open to um, looking at the best ways, looking at alternative ways and the best ways to effect policy and better government.
So,
I do think that we as a city, I mean, I think we have a lot to be proud of. We are first in the country in a lot of things. Our investment in public education, for example, is I have heard that we have the highest investment per pupil, and if that's not correct, um, we are certainly up there. And I'm just saying that to say there are a lot of things we do well, environment, public transportation. And yet, if you look at any of these issues, there are ways that we could be better. I still think we could have fare free buses. I think that would be much better for public transportation, would make a big difference in our transportation infrastructure or ecosystem. I think we could be better with environmental issues. I know we could be better with education issues. So there's, even though the government, I think there's a lot to be proud of, I hope that the next mayor is able to take us to the next level.
so in your eyes, does that require somebody to be like a moderate, or, I don't want to butcher your words. It sounds like, from my vantage point, that you want somebody who's a moderate.
Well, I didn't say that. I think that this is a city that would not get along well with a conservative, but whether it's a moderate or more progressive. I remember there was somebody who used to say that you take somebody who's moderate here and put them in another city in the hinterlands of the country, and they would be somewhere between progressive and viewed as being communist.
Mhm.
So all these things are all relative. Being ideologically stuck would be a problem. There needs to be flexibility, openness to best approaches. I was yesterday reading some materials on cashless bail, just because that's an issue that Congress is trying to beat us up on. And the literature referred to the research and whether having cashless bail has actually increased crime, that there are other ways to deal with crime. And it just speaks to the point that I'm making, is being open to looking at research, alternatives, and better approaches at effecting our goals. And
Gotcha.
that's not ideologically driven.
I got one more follow-up, if that's cool for the time being. So, given that this is an election year, we got quite a few council elections. I want to ask you the same question as it relates to the council. What is your vision, or what do you see as the best makeup of the council after the end of the election season? Once all the smoke clears, what is the best combination of, I guess, political leanings that you would see on an ideal 13-person council?
But I feel like I'm at the beginning of a council period instead of in the middle of it. I'm not sure it's much different than what I was just saying with regard to the mayor's seat. Folks on the council who are intellectually curious, willing to grab the broad range of issues that come before the council, and looking for best strategies or best policies to affect our goals that is not ideologically driven.
And do you see the election, just going back to your comment earlier, do you see it hindering the council's work on the current election season? Just seeing what you
It
said
just
earlier.
is what it is. I mean, there's been an election every 2 years with half the council up every 2 years. And there's going to be more turnover this time, but it's still basically half the council being up for election.
Chairman, you were talking before about, the ongoing back and forth with Congress as it relates to the district. Do you think whoever is mayor next should make protecting and strengthening home rule one of their top priorities?
Absolutely. I think for all of us, it is protecting and strengthening home rule. At the moment, it is navigating the choppy waters between like the rhetoric we're hearing from the White House that DC is, I guess we haven't heard it recently, but that DC is like the worst place in the country to live. That's not helpful. And the members of Congress, the majority, which is a slim majority, but nonetheless, they're voting very partisan and trying to erode home rule. And not just erode home rule, but actually enact policies that would be harmful to the city. Some of the measures actually probably will make public safety worse. In the city, we, the government of the district, have looked at how do we reduce crime through short-term and long-term strategies. A short-term strategy is building community trust in our police through better accountability. One of the bills in the Congress would repeal our accountability law that we adopted a few years ago. So from a short-term perspective, that's harmful. From a long-term perspective, one of the ways to improve public safety in the city is to reduce the rate of recidivism for folks who are returning after having served a sentence. Some of the bills in Congress would probably increase recidivism. Locking up 14-year-olds as adults almost certainly ensures that those 14-year-olds will grow up to be adult criminals. Whereas other strategies that are practiced across the country, focusing on rehabilitation for juveniles, is much more effective at reducing crime. Just as examples. So I think I got a little sidetracked there. We have to navigate our way through navigate our way through the choppy waters that the White House and the Republicans in Congress have been dishing out to the district. And so that is a top priority, is protecting, maintaining home rule. Yeah.
So tomorrow's agenda, the Food and Friends Property Tax Exemption Act is going for final reading. Can you explain to me the impetus of this legislation and why it's needed, given that the property is already tax exempt? At least so it seems to me.
I hope you're seeing that there's some sort of a facial expression on my face here. Yes, Food and Friends is a charitable organization, nonprofit, tax exempt. They've been tax exempt since their formation. They're proud, so they haven't paid property tax. They had a billboard on their property, which was commercial and was not tax exempt. It was roughly 3% of the property value. So they paid taxes on that. Well, the billboard, either they took it down or it fell down. I think it fell down. So they made the mistake of applying for 100% tax exemption. The CFO looked at this charitable organization and said, we're not sure that you're only focused on the District of Columbia. You seem to be doing a lot in the region. So maybe you don't deserve your tax exemption. So we are moving this bill preemptively to ensure that they maintain their tax exempt status. If you're familiar with Food and Friends, they do a lot of good charitable work for people who are homebound and need meals, nutritious meals. And personally, I don't care where they deliver the meals. I'm proud that they are in the District of Columbia. And all this legislation does is preserve the status quo, including that 3% exemption. We're maintaining that.
Got it. Thank you.
You're not press, Bill Rice.
Oh, going back to the House passing some those bills overturning DC laws on crime. What is your thoughts about what's going to happen in the Senate? Do you think the Senate is going to take up any or all of them? Any intelligence you can help us on?
We're
that?
trying to figure that out, what the Senate is going to do. The simple answer is that generally speaking, the Senate needs 60 votes to proceed with legislation, and there are not 60 Republicans. The Democrats have generally been supportive of the district. Not 100% if you look at the votes in the House. The Democrats have not 100% stuck together. So we're just going to have conversations with members of the Senate. I would hope that the Republicans would not go forward with the legislation. I could rephrase that. I would hope that the majority will not go forward. One of uh, the characteristics of each of these bills is that none of them has had a public hearing. None of them has been exposed to any expert testimony or expert input. And so what we're getting is just a lot of rhetoric. I'm thinking I think it's the bill that would eliminate the Attorney General for the district as a independent elected position and instead have the Attorney General appointed by the president without Senate confirmation. And some of the rhetoric behind that by the proponents has been that the prosecutor has declined to prosecute 2/3, roughly 67% of cases. Well, actually, that's the U.S. Attorney 2-3 years ago, not the D.C. Attorney General. But that rhetoric is allowed to just be out there because there's been no public hearing, there's been no public discussion, and that criticism applies to every one of these bills. There's been no public discussion. There's been no analysis of what the research or the evidence reveals as best practice. These bills have just moved forward. Many of the bills that the House marked up, that the House voted on, were introduced on September 8th and voted on in committee on September 10th. We didn't even have the text until maybe the day of the vote. And then a number of them got amended by the committee. I don't understand the process, but what was presented on the floor was actually an amended version. It didn't get a vote on the amendment. So what I'm trying to say is that this has not been a deliberative process with regard to these bills.
Do you get any impression the White House is involved?
I do have that impression, but I have no evidence.
What's your impression that they are pushing one or all of them?
I just gave you my answer.
Okay, thank you.
Streeteries legislation?
There are two bills, as I recall. One is dealing with alcoholic beverage licensing. And I don't think there's really any controversy there. The other bill is being moved by Councilmember Allen, and it speaks to the public space aspects. I don't think there's controversy there. We want to continue the program, but it's come time to have a bit more regulation around it. Remember, the streeteries were initiated as a pandemic response. Maybe people didn't want to sit in restaurants. Restaurants weren't getting customers, let people sit outside, and people weren't driving that much in the city anyway, so make the curb space available. But it's time we got more regulation around it.
About that, it's It seems like it's not just that we need regulation, but the regulations keep changing. So now there might be new guidelines. Should restaurants who are taking down their streeteries now expect maybe even another set of guidelines when spring comes around? How does this seem right that the city keeps changing the rules around this so much?
I'm not aware that the city keeps changing the rules. Now, this is not in my committee, so I don't have a direct role with regard to the streeteries. This is the first time we've had legislation on this in a couple of years.
Right, but you get what I'm saying, like,
No, I don't.
have you dined at a streetery? I mean, like, they're just like, it seems like it's in such flux. And the restaurateurs who have had a tough time, obviously, they don't know what to do next either. Meanwhile, some of them are coming down, some streeteries are coming down while the council might vote tomorrow to get rid of some of the regulations that that DDOT came up with. There's just a lot of confusion around
Of
this.
course, there would be some confusion because we're going through a transition here.
So that's normal.
So, my understanding is that the Public Space Committee over at DDOT has come up with some proposed regulations. I think Councilmember Allen's bill speaks to some of that. So that's new and different. But I wouldn't call that like perpetual change. I would say what I said before, which was that the streeteries were initiated during the pandemic, and now we're looking at some regulations to regulate them, and recognizing that they're here to stay.
Do you think it'll have, was it 9 votes, 8 votes?
Yes,
To pass
Yes.
Allen's bill?
yes, Sam.
Net zero requirement for the Ward 8 pools.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind expounding on why you think the bill wouldn't go far.
Well, I think it's, for one thing, I think there needs, just as I was criticizing Congress, I think there needs to be a little bit more consideration, probably a public hearing with regard to why we would want to change the net zero requirements. I know that DGS has been quick to say that net zero is way too expensive to implement. Maybe they're right. Let's hear it out instead of just these conversations. So this bill sort of, if it were to be approved, would be the council saying, yeah, we give up. Net zero is too hard to implement. I think there needs to be more thought around that. But the other challenge is that the bill doesn't speak to net zero being difficult for, I think the word is natatoriums. It speaks to net zero being difficult for natatoriums in Ward 8. Well, is Ward 8, I know every ward is unique, but is Ward 8 any more unique than any other ward?
Have you expressed these concerns to the council member?
I've not discussed it with any council member.
And as far as,
But it will be discussed, I suspect, at the breakfast tomorrow.
no question, as far as DGS's assertion that net zero is expensive, what truth do you find to that?
I suspect that it's not as bad as DGS says.
Gotcha. Okay.
That doesn't mean it's not worth our taking another look at it, but doing so in a more deliberative way than just an emergency bill that comes up with 4 days' notice. Other questions, Megan?
See for the boards and commissions?
Yes, that's just a continuation of an existing emergency that we adopted back in the spring. Bega decided last year that it was going to expand by something like 60 boards and commissions, reporting requirements, which resulted in a lot of pushback from some of the boards. One example that comes to mind is the retirement board, which has extensive disclosure requirements for its members. And the idea that they would have to file a separate second disclosure statement was objectionable to them. And so we put all that on hold. If we haven't needed those boards and commissions to be reporting for the last however many years, 10 years, I'm not sure why we need to now. And I'm not even sure who looks at them. And maybe you do. Other questions? Damn, you may have the monopoly.
Say it again?
You may have the monopoly here.
I mean, if that's it, if that's what it is, uh, can you talk to us about your reelection bid?
Well, I can't say too much because
So, all right,
I
well then, like,
can't campaign in the Wilson building.
I'll frame it like this. What is the unfinished business at hand for the chairman? And if you can just reflect on, given your challenge last go around with former advisor, neighborhood commissioner Aaron Palmer, what have you seen? To what degree have you fulfilled your promise from that point up until this point?
I think I'll answer it this way. I think there's a lot of unfinished business, which I discussed before. I discussed it in the context of what I would look for with the mayor, but it applies to me as well. The committee of the whole for the council is different than the committee of the whole in most state legislatures in that there's substantive issues like education that are in the committee of the whole here. And I think there is still a lot of room for improvement in public education. So on the one hand, if you put me in front of Congress or in front of anybody outside the city, I will sing praises because we're doing pretty well as a public education system. But within the Wilson building, I will say that I'm completely dissatisfied with how we're doing, how we're improving with public education. You know that the gap between at-risk kids, I could say between Black kids and white kids is huge. The achievement gap, that needs to be closed. We know that the test scores, we celebrate that we've had the largest growth in test scores in math and English of any large city school system. And yet, I'm trying to remember, I think reading is in the 30% in terms of being proficient, and math is in the 20s. That's just unacceptable. We can be doing much, much better. Look at our attendance rate or truancy rates, way too high. And in my view, public education is the great equalizer. It's the way that we will solve a lot of our other problems that we struggle to solve, like affordability, like the wealth gap, like just social justice issues we have. Kids who are learning, are doing well in school, are not being delinquent, are not committing crime. And they have their whole future, every opportunity before them if we do better as a public education system. That's just one example of unfinished business that I'm chomping at the bit to continue working on.
And could that be fulfilled without a standalone education committee?
Now, why are you going there?
I have to.
No, you don't have to. You don't have to. None of you have to ask any of the questions
I have
you
to.
asked.
No.
The education under the committee of the whole, we have done far more, forgive me, predecessors, but we have done far more than any other education committee in years. We have more staff dedicated to this. That's my choice. We have moved some significant legislation like Schools First that no other education committee thought of to bring some stability. We've been very focused with oversight hearings. We don't just have oversight hearings in February on education, but we have it, as you know, this fall. We'll do it in the spring as well as in February. You don't need a standalone committee for that. You just don't. Did I prompt any other questions? You may be the last question.
I don't want this to be. Every other state in America has an education committee. Every state has. Why do you think DC doesn't need an education committee?
Why does it need a separate committee? We're not doing well?
Every state's decided they need one, so why doesn't DC?
Well, maybe because their committee as a whole, it doesn't have any substantive matters in its jurisdiction. I don't know. I don't even know that your assertion is correct. There are probably some states that don't even have an education
It
committee.
was 100% correct a few years ago. I submitted, might have changed. Maybe one state got rid of theirs in the past 2 years, but
Okay. I'm interested in results. And I think that the council is doing pretty well with regard to education. Well enough? No, we can always do better, which gets back to my question that I think there's a lot more to be done. There's a lot more to be done with the other issue that's under the committee of the whole, which is the Department of Buildings, to reduce illegal construction, to get more inspectors. We've put money in the budget, but they have yet to be fully hired. And to make it easier for residents to be able to get permits, make it easier for businesses to do business, getting their permits, their certificates of occupancy quickly. There's a lot to be done, even though I think the Department of Buildings is doing much better today than it was a few years ago.
That was a good pivot.
Thank you. I think that's going to be the last question. Thank you.
About, not on the agenda, but Waymo is spreading across the country. How does
I
the
like where you
Wilson
put
building
that,
feel about
spreading
Waymo?
like the big
It's-
ooze.
The robo taxis are spreading around the country. I guess there's a bill that Council Chairman.
There's at least one bill pending in the council
Allen,
right now on
yeah,
Waymo.
Do you have a feeling one way or the other on whether it should advance or not?
It's actually on my list to talk to Councilmember Allen about.
What are you going to tell him?
What am I going to tell him? We're going to discuss what his views are on the legislation and if he's moving it, when, and if he's not moving it, why.
What is your view on the legislation?
I think we have to step into the area and adopt some legislation. I think I'll leave it at that. I've prompted one more hand. Last question.
Are you
Sorry,
aware
Lindsay.
of the Dill Sherwood podcast, and are you ready to be a guest?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Yeah. I knew you were too shy to